reminder, please turn your mics on and clearly state your name before speaking to ensure that members of the audience can hear you, and please mute your mics when not speaking to eliminate any feedback noise. Because this is a virtual meeting, a roll call vote will be taken for each action item on the agenda. Phone only attendees will need to press *6 to unmute yourself, and Linda will now take the roll.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Grant Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Ben Bitter.
Here.
Thank you. Chris Bridges.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Patenay for Greg Byers. Dan Clevenger.
Present.
Thank you. Jason Crampton. Jorge Gastelum.
Here.
Thank you. Henry Ikwat-Ukwa. David Janover.
Present.
Thank you. Heaney Knudsen.
Here.
Thank you. Scott Lowe. Adina Lund.
Here.
Thank you. Hal Marin. Jamie McCracken. Mark Mellichenko.
Here.
Thank you. Sumit Mohan.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Mood.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Moore. Christopher Salas. Woodrow Scouten. Robert Yades for Shelley Seiler.
Here.
Thank you. Ed Stillings.
Here.
Thank you. Bob Thaxton. Kristen Taylor.
Here.
Thank you.
Here.
Chris Wanamaker.
Here.
Thank you. Michael Weber. Steve Wilcox.
Here.
Thank you. Herschel Workman.
Here.
Thank you. Mohammed Yosef.
Here.
Thank you. And Chair.
Here.
Thank you. Is there anyone I've missed? Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number.
Buckeye, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Hello, sorry, this is Paul Patenay with ADOT. Thank you.
Thank you. Who was the one before Paul?
Scott Lowe, Buckeye.
Thank you, Scott.
Is there anybody else who's just joined the call? Okay, thank you. Item number 2 is a call to the audience. An opportunity for public comment on the agenda was provided ahead of time, and I understand that no comments have been received. Is that correct, Linda?
Yes, Chair, no public comments have been received for this item or any other item on the agenda.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item number 3, Transportation Policy and Planning Director's report. Tim Stromig, Transportation Policy and Planning Director, will provide a report to the Transportation Review Committee on activities of general interest. Tim.
Thank you, Chair Zeter, members of the TRC. Good to see you this morning. I hope everybody enjoyed the long President's Day weekend. I have a few updates for the group this morning. I want to first start off by thanking Dan Clevenger for participating on this committee for the past 7 months. He has been serving as the interim transportation director for the city of Glendale. Starting next month, the new director, Shahid Abbas, will be representing the city on TRC. So I just want to thank Dan for his time serving on this committee, and I'm sure we'll work with him again in the future. Next item is regarding raise grants. On January 27th, 2022, U.S. Department of Transportation issued a notice of funding opportunity for the raise grant, formerly known as Build and Tiger grants. A total of $1.5 billion is available through a competitive merit-based grant program. If any of you have ever applied in the past with these grants, you know that they take a significant amount of work in application development and lead time, so I know it's challenging. A memo was sent out by Patrick Stone, Transportation Improvement Program Supervisor, on February 14th, notifying members of the MAG Management Committee and TRC of this funding opportunity and the specific details associated with this grant. The raised grant applications must be submitted through grants.gov by 5 o'clock Eastern Time on April 14th, 2022. If your agency is interested in pursuing a raised grant and receiving a letter of regional support for your specific project, please contact Patrick Stone by this Monday at noon, February 20th, 2022. If you have any questions on that, please reach out to Patrick after the meeting. Also, we are in desperate need for crossing guard volunteers. For those of you who are not aware, MAG and member agencies have been collaborating for 17 years in hosting regional crossing guard training workshops. Over the last 10 years, and more significantly, over the last 2 years, I would say, we have been losing key local agency staff to retirement or advancement within the agency that have participated in the past. We need trainers for the crossing guard training workshops immediately, and are requesting your help in recruiting junior level staff from your agencies, traffic engineering departments, planning, or any other department inside your agency to participate in these workshops. We have produced a fact sheet that highlights why the training is essential, as well as what other trainers and crossing guards say about the importance of the training in keeping our children safe. This flyer was distributed via email to intergovernmental representatives as a call to action in our efforts to recruit local agency participation in these valuable training events. We will soon be planning for this year's workshops, and we need to have these trainers in place no later than March of this year. Any questions regarding this item can be directed to MAG Transportation Safety Program Manager, Margaret Herrera, or you can shoot an email over to srts@azmag.gov. We appreciate your help in this issue. Next item is I want to make you aware of a training session that happened a couple days ago. MAG hosted a virtual training for MAG member agencies and MAG staff on how to use MS2 Traffic Data Management System. The training was provided by the system vendor MS2 and was jointly hosted and attended by ADOT. The training was focused on enhancing user experience on how to access region-wide traffic count data and to introduce new modules which manage auto-polling continuous traffic data, pedestrian and bicycle counts. We had about 71 attendees participate in this training. The session was recorded. If you missed out on this training or would like to have a member of your staff participate, please contact Wong Zhang, Transportation Data Program Manager, with any questions after this meeting. RARF revenues collections continue to do great. January collections were about 22% higher than January the previous year. HERF revenues bounced out a little bit from the previous month. They're about 2.9% higher than the previous year, which is pretty much right on track. Mr. Chair, my last item is that I want to congratulate Steve Tate, MAG staff, on his retirement. Steve is retiring next Monday after 33 years of service with the agency. I'm sure that most of the committee members or members of your staff have worked with Steve in the past on tip questions, call for projects, or just picked his brain about regional funding opportunities. Steve has been instrumental for the TIP group. He will be greatly missed. I just want to congratulate him, and if you have a moment this week before he retires on Monday, shoot him an email, give him a call, congratulate him on a wonderful career at MAG. Mr. Chair, that completes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Stroh. Moving on to item number 4, approval of the consent agenda. Items 4A through 4F are on the consent agenda. I understand there needs to be a modification to item 4D. Is that correct? Did I hear that before the meeting started?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Patrick Stone. What the issue is, what's on the screen is correct. Item 4D is listed correctly. However, in the agenda packet on the summary transmittal, the heading on that item is incorrect. It's a duplicate of item 4C. However, the requested action is correct on that item.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stone. Are there any items that members wish to be taken off the consent agenda? Do I need to read those? I forgot. Linda?
You do not.
Okay, great. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve consent items 4A through 4F?
I would move approval of the consent agenda as shown on the screen. This is
This is-
Jason and Chandler.
Thank you.
And second that, this is Kristen Gilbert.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Linda, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Grant Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Benjamin Bitter.
Aye.
Thank you. Chris Bridges.
Aye.
Thank you. Paul Patney.
Aye.
Thank you. Dan Clevenger.
Aye.
Thank you. Jason Crampton.
Aye.
Thank you. Jorge Gastelum.
Aye.
Thank you. David Janover.
Aye.
Thank you. Keeney Knudsen.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. Adina Lund.
Aye.
Thank you. Mark Malachenko.
Aye.
Thank you. Sumit Mohan.
Aye.
Thank you. Paul Mood.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Yabez.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Taylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Christopher Wanamaker.
Aye.
Thank you. Steve Wilcox.
Aye.
Thank you. Herschel Workman.
Aye.
Thank you. Mohammed Yosef.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone?
Mike Weaver's on now.
Thank you, Mike.
Linda, this is Henry Kuchukwa. I'm on now.
Hi, Henry. And how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item number 5, MAG Federal Highway Administration Funding, Federal Fiscal Year 2022 Supplemental Closeout. This item will be presented by Patrick Stone, MAG Transportation Improvement Program Supervisor, and this item is on the agenda for action. Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the Transportation Review Committee. Before I start the presentation, I want to note that this presentation will actually be very similar to the presentation I provided back in December when we did the first round of closeout funding. If I could get the next slide, please. So this slide highlights the specific programs and projects that are eligible for closeout funding. I did want to note that neither the Freeway Lifecycle Program or Arterial Lifecycle Program are included as part of this closeout. Next slide, please. What's the purpose of closeout? As always, the purpose of the closeout process is to ensure that the region uses all federal funding allocated in a given fiscal year. As we had an unused balance from the first closeout cycle this year, there was an opportunity to make additional funding available. As the bottom of the slide highlights the various sources of closeout funding, the lion's share comes from project deferrals and closeouts. Next slide, please. Just to orient to the policy, closeouts covered in the MAG federal funding programming guidelines and procedures, last approved by MAG Regional Council in June of 2015, and highlights how the closeout process is actually developed and administered. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the basis for the funding for the supplemental closeout cycle based on reviews of available revenues, anticipated projects that will deliver in the current fiscal year, and including the funding that was allocated for closeout in the previous cycle. There was approximately $12 million available for funding for closeout. MAG received just over $6.2 million in eligible requests, leaving a balance of approximately $5.8 million. If I could get the next slide, please. So this slide shows the breakdown of requests received by request type. The largest requested area is, and not probably surprisingly, is for additional funding associated with currently programmed projects. We also saw significant interest in funding underway projects that were previously approved. Next slide. So here's the analysis of the closeout and the proposed funding scenario. As mentioned, we had $12 million available in funding. 6.2 million would be requested to be approved, and the balance of 5.8 million, as noted at the bottom of the slide, would be rolled forward to fiscal year 2023 for any closeout action next year. Next slide. As noted by the chair earlier, item is on the agenda for action. Requested action is to recommend approval of the proposed supplemental closeout funding scenario. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be available for any questions of yourself or the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Are there any questions? All right, hearing none. Is there a motion to approve?
Robert Yabez, motion to approve.
Thank you, Robert. Second,
This is
Anderson,
Dave
second.
Janover. I
Mr. An-
second it.
I heard Mr. Anderson second. Thank you. Linda, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Grant Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Ben Bitter.
Aye.
Thank you. Chris Bridges.
Aye.
Thank you. Paul Patney.
Aye.
Thank you. Dan Clevenger.
Aye.
Thank you. Jason Crampton.
Aye.
Thank you. Jorge Gastelum.
Aye.
Thank you. Henry Ikwat Ukwa.
Aye.
Thank you. David Janover.
Aye.
Thank you. Keeney Knudsen.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. Adina Lund.
Aye.
Thank you. Mark Malachenko.
Aye.
Thank you. Sumit Mohan.
Aye.
Thank you. Paul Mood.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Yabez.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Taylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Chris Wanamaker.
Aye.
Thank you. Michael Weber.
Aye.
Thank you. Steve Wilcox.
Aye.
Thank you. Herschel Workman.
Aye.
Thank you. Mohammed Yosef.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone I've missed? The motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 6, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, overview of regional funding impacts. This item will be presented by Patrick Stone again, MAG Transportation Improvement Program Supervisor, and this item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Mr. Stone.
Sorry about that. I was muted for a second. Thank you, Chair. Members of the TRC, again, good morning. I want to first start a nomenclature cleanup. As you see on the slide, it does highlight the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. You'll also hear this called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, throughout the presentation, and things you may see externally. You'll see those terms used somewhat interchangeably. Next slide. So first, I wanted to start with some context. While we don't have all of the information that we need at this point, I wanted to provide an overview of what we do know, some anticipated impacts, and where we see this process moving from here. Over the last few months, you've seen a lot of emphasis on the half-cent sales tax, both as part of the development of the extension of Proposition 400, also as it relates to enabling legislation. But today, the focus, as highlighted on the screen, is going to be on federal funding in the region, including both those formula funds allocated to the region and also federal discretionary funds, usually processed through grants. Next slide, please. So IIJA was signed into law back in November on the 15th, and it provided a significant increase in funding available to the region and is replacing the FAST Act, which was in place for almost 6 years. Across the board increases in both highway and transit funding, also an emphasis, as I mentioned, on discretionary grants. But where I really wanted to focus was on the two items on the right. While IIJA has been signed into law, it's been in law for a few months now, most of the funding associated with the act actually requires the passage of a full year budget bill. While we're still operating under a continuing resolution until March 11th, noting this is the third continuing resolution, most of the new programs associated with IIJA and as well the additional funding associated with IIJA can't be accessed at this point until we see that full year bill in place. One unique part of bill, which is easier to say than IIJA, is that it had a component called advanced appropriations. Essentially, this was funding specifically set aside from the general fund over the 5 years of the act that's been approved. It's guaranteed funding. So it allowed some programs and some processes to take place that otherwise wouldn't have been able to get started. If we can have the next slide, please. So this slide highlights the FHWA formula funding that flows to the MAG region. As you see, it flows in 2 different specific types of avenues. First is that funding which flows to ADOT, and the large part of that for the MAG region is the portion that's allocated to the Freeway Lifecycle Program. In addition, ADOT also has funding that is made available to member agencies and for agencies throughout the state through a statewide competitive process. Other funding stream at the bottom, as highlighted, are those dollars that come directly to MAG. These are those dollars that go through the strategic investment plan and are guided by the policies that the region has set forth. Next slide, please. So delving further into the funding that flows through ADOT, we see that there's going to be a substantial, or what's projected to be a substantial increase to the funding that goes into the Freeway Lifecycle Program, approximately $40 to $50 million a year. In addition, we anticipate additional funding for both the safety and off-system bridge competitive programs. While these funding amounts are smaller compared to the freeway program, these types of projects do help to advance regional goals that are critical. There are also 3 new programs to emphasize that will be managed through ADOT. First is the carbon reduction program. There's also the resiliency program, which also goes by the name Protect. And then finally, the National Electric Vehicle Charging Program. This is the one that MAG is tracking closely with our partners at ADOT and FHWA, as we've seen significant interest in this program from member agencies. Excuse me, as I noted, the electric program, as noted in the previous slide, certain parts of IIJA were actually funded through advanced appropriations. The electric vehicle program was actually one of those programs that was funded. Hence, we've actually seen FHWA and USDOT rolling out guidance, although it's still early in the process. And as we find out more information, we'll certainly be communicating that to member agencies. Next slide, please. So here we see the funding that's allocated to the MAG region directly. Of note, obviously, the 3 core programs, the Surface Transportation Program, CMAQ, Transportation Alternatives, we're looking to see an increase somewhere in the magnitude of 8 to 10 million. Not large dollars, but still always important to the region and critical to deliver those key projects. I really did want to highlight at the bottom of this slide, the carbon program. As you notice, it was also on the previous slide. For what the state is administering, this is a unique program in that it's a new program, but part of the funding will be allocated to the MAG region directly, and we're anticipating that should be right about $9 million. The issue with the carbon program, it's actually part of the actual Infrastructure Act, and as such, since the budget bill has not been passed, we don't have any guidance or funding levels yet associated with that. So we're still waiting to see further information from USDOT, and once we have that, we'll certainly follow back up with member agencies. Next slide, please. So for FTA formula funding, unlike FHWA formula funding, which flows through ADOT and MAG, these actually flow through the urbanized areas within the region. There are 2 urbanized areas in the MAG region, the first being the Phoenix Mesa, the large one, which covers most of the area. An additional 25 million, that's a substantial increase. We've seen all along that transit funding has significantly increased. So the Phoenix Mesa UZA gets approximately 25 million. To a lesser extent, the Avondale Goodyear UZA will see another $1.3 million annually. I did want to note that we do anticipate the Avondale Goodyear UZA being absorbed into the Phoenix Mesa UZA once the Census Bureau finalizes the results of the 2020 census. Next slide, please. So one of the highlights of IIJA or bill was the growth in grant-based funding nationwide. The Act takes notable grants that you're familiar with, such as RAISE and Infra, continues those with additional funding, but then also introduces a myriad of new grant opportunities. And part of those have been included as part of your agenda packet. Next slide. This slide actually provides a little more detail on some of the specific discretionary grants. We're still waiting on guidance for most of these grants. We'll provide updates, of course, as that becomes available. One thing I did want to note, these grants are extremely competitive. They're competed nationwide. They have very specific requirements and emphasis areas. And the other thing, and as Tim noted earlier, these grants also require significant amounts of resources from member agencies, both in terms of cost and in terms of staff time. So just one of those things to be cognizant of when agencies are looking at pursuing grants. So next slide, please. Given all this, where do we go from here? And I've said it a few times, and I'll say it again, of course. The critical step is really that first item. We're awaiting the appropriations bill. Until there's a full year of funding, many new programs can't get started. We're currently operating under fiscal year 21 funding levels, so a lot can't get started until we see that budget bill. To the next point, one area we see a significant increase in funding the freeway program. Another component of all this additional funding is it underscores the need for enabling legislation. The freeway program, those capital intensive projects, composed of both the federal funds and those regional funds as well. And without both components, you just can't deliver these projects. So the emphasis there obviously is getting enabling legislation through the legislature this year, and then through the ballot later this year in November. Regionally, we're seeing the increase in formula funds, assessing how we might take advantage of that funding and where there might be opportunities to jumpstart some of those regional programs that have been identified as part of the extension. Transit funding goes through, we'll be working with MAG Transit Committee, moving through the committee process, following the guidelines and processes that have been in place. And then finally, the new programs. Once we see the budget bill, once we start seeing guidance from USDOT, FHWA, we can then start rolling out those new programs. As I mentioned earlier, the carbon program, once we know more details, we'll then be coming back through the committee process, developing those programs, developing those guidelines. Next slide. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'd be certainly happy to answer any questions you or the committee might have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Patrick? Thank you. Hearing none, we will move on to item number 7. Member agency updates. Are there any announcements by TRC members? Thank you. Moving on to item number 8. Are there any requests by a TRC member for a future agenda item? All right, thank you. Adjournment. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 24th at 10 a.m. with no further business. This meeting of the MAG TRC is adjourned at 10:28 a.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.